It was the company's annual Thanksgiving dinner, and my fiancé's closest family friend, Julian, drunkenly slid a piece of paper across the table. "Cole, my man," he slurred. "Ava promised me years ago she'd have a baby for me." He tapped the paper. "Before you two get married, you need to sign this Baby Pact." I froze, looking over at Ava. She handed me a pen. "Julian's wasted. He's just bringing up some stupid joke from when we were kids." Her voice was light, dismissive. "Don't take it seriously, and don't give him a hard time. Just sign it so he'll drop it." Seeing her completely unconcerned expression, my stomach dropped. This marriage, I realized, was already over. I snatched the paper, tore it to shreds, balled it up, and threw it right in Julian's face. He flinched back as if he'd been burned. His eyes widened, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Dude, what the hell is your problem?" Ava's brow instantly furrowed, her tone sharp and accusatory. "Cole, if you didn't want to sign it, fine. But did you have to humiliate him like that?" I fought down the rage building in my chest, my nails digging into my palms as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Humiliate him? Ava, tell me, who exactly is humiliating who right now?" My gaze swept over the uncomfortable faces of my colleagues at the table before landing back on Julian. In front of my entire company, he tells me to sign an agreement for him to have a child with my fiancée. What do you call that? Forcing me to publicly sanction my own cuckolding. Julian clutched his forehead and staggered dramatically. "It was a joke, man. Can't you take a joke?" he shouted, his voice thick with booze. "Everyone knows I've been messing with Ava like this since we were kids." As he spoke, he reached out to grab her arm. She gently brushed his hand away, but the indulgence in the gesture was unmistakable. Ava sighed and turned back to me, her eyes laced with impatience. "He's obviously drunk off his ass, Cole. Why are you stooping to his level? It's a worthless piece of paper, a dumb promise we made when we were teenagers. Who would actually take that seriously?" She even shot me a look of reproach, as if I were the one making a scene, ruining the festive mood. "A joke." I watched as she instinctively shifted her body to slightly shield Julian from me. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a fistful of ice. "Ava, look me in the eye and tell me this is just a joke." From behind her, Julian mumbled, "Just a joke." "Ava, see? Cole is being so aggressive." He rubbed his eyes, feigning hurt, but the corner of his mouth twitched into a smirk he couldn't quite hide. Ava's frown deepened, her voice hardening. "What else would it be? Do you honestly think I'd agree to something so ridiculous? Can you just be mature for 1 second and stop being so possessive? It's Thanksgiving. Everyone's having a good time. Do you have to make things this awkward? You know he's always been a prankster." Staring at the way she protected him, I was suddenly overcome with a profound exhaustion. She wasn't wrong. Julian loved his pranks. I had learned that the hard way over the past year. The first time was at our engagement party. He'd stolen the diamond ring I was about to propose with. I'd torn the private dining room apart in a cold sweat, on the verge of calling the police, before he pulled it from behind a decorative vase, grinning. "Just messing with you, Cole. You're not mad, are you?" Everyone had laughed, and Ava had squeezed my hand, telling me Julian was just being mischievous and not to mind him. The second time was the night before I was to present a bid for a critical project. He'd snuck into my home office and used my work computer to send the client a greeting email riddled with typos, unprofessional slang, and emojis. The next morning, I was met with the client's icy questions and a nearly collapsed deal. When I figured out what happened, Ava stood in front of him, defending him. She said he was just trying to help me loosen up because I worked too hard. Then she blamed me for not having a password on my laptop. The third time was a company retreat, hiking in the Hudson Valley. Julian volunteered to lead the way, but deliberately guided me off the main path onto a narrow, crumbling trail. As I was looking at the view, he shoved me hard from behind. I tumbled downward, my life saved only by a desperate, reflexive grip on an exposed tree root. My entire body dangled over 100-foot drop. Julian stood at the edge of the cliff, his face not showing fear, but an intense, almost scientific curiosity as he watched me struggle between life and death. It was only when other colleagues caught up and screamed that he snapped out of it, rushing over with a terrified, tearful act. "Cole, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was so dangerous here. I didn't do it on purpose." Back at the lodge, as Ava dabbed antiseptic on the scrapes on my arms, she'd sighed. "He's not brave, you know. He was probably just as scared as you were. He just doesn't have a filter. You're the adult here. Don't hold it against him. We just won't go to places like that again." She casually dismissed the moment that almost cost me my life as him just being thoughtless. These pranks had gotten progressively worse. And for Ava's sake, I had tolerated all of them. I thought my patience would earn me peace, her understanding, her support. I never imagined it would lead to this. The The most absurd and insulting prank of all. I looked at Ava's impatient, blaming eyes, then at Julian, hiding behind her with a triumphant smirk he could no longer conceal. The fire that had been smoldering in my chest for so long finally burned away the last of my hesitation. Okay, it was just a prank, I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of any emotion. Ava let out a sigh of relief, her own tone softening. Good. I'm glad you understand. My gaze shifted from her and locked onto Julian. But, Julian, I said, my voice dropping, my tolerance is not a welcome mat for you to wipe your feet on again and again. Everything you've done before now, I let it slide for Ava's sake. I wrote it off as a dog nipping at my heels. I paused. But from this moment on, the jokes are over. And one more thing, I don't want to see you in the office again. You're fired. Ava shot to her feet, the legs of her chair screeching against the floor. Cole, that's enough. Are you so pathetic you have to take it out on a drunk kid? Julian immediately tugged on her sleeve, his eyes red-rimmed as he whispered, Ava, don't. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have made that joke. Cole has every right to be angry. Don't blame him. The more he played the victim, the more pronounced the anger and sympathy on Ava's face became. She shook off his hand and pointed a finger directly at me. Cole, I want you to apologize to Julian. Right now, or you'll regret it. The entire room was silent. All my colleagues were staring at their plates. I looked her straight in the eye. I will never apologize. Fine, fine. Ava nodded, a cold sneer on her lips. You don't apologize, we break up. She grabbed Julian's wrist and stormed out. I didn't try to stop her. The door slammed shut behind them, the vibration rattling the silverware. The room remained silent, the only sound the low hum of the HVAC system. I slowly sat back down and took a sip from my glass. The water was cold. A few minutes later, someone quietly suggested it was time to leave. One by one, they got up, avoiding my eyes as they said their goodbyes. I just nodded, saying nothing. Outside the restaurant, I stood on the curb and lit a cigarette. Before I could finish it, my phone screen lit up. It was a text from Ava. You've disappointed me more than I can say. I didn't reply. I just put the phone back in my pocket, the screen dark. The next morning, I went to the office as usual. A letter of resignation was sitting on my desk. The head of HR came to see me, her tone cautious. Mr. Miller, about Julian Vance's departure. Process it according to procedure, I said without looking up. Around noon, Ava arrived. She walked straight into my office and closed the door. Cole, do you really have to be this cruel? I put down my pen and looked at her. So you still think this is all my fault, isn't it? Her voice rose. He's just a kid. He was drunk and talking nonsense. But you? You tore up the pact, threw a fit in front of the entire company, and then threatened to fire him. Cole, he's like a brother to me. Did you ever once stop to think about how I feel? And did you ever think about how I feel? I shot back. From hiding the ring at our engagement party, to impersonating me in an email and almost destroying a major deal, to pushing me off a cliff on that hike. Every single time, you said it was just a prank, that he didn't know any better. Ava, I'm not a saint. I put up with him because of you, but I'm done putting up with him. She stared at me, stunned, as if she never expected me to bring up the past. Her tone softened slightly. That's all in the past. He really knows he was wrong this time. He was crying this morning, telling me how sorry he was. Whether he's really sorry or not, you know the truth better than anyone. I cut her off, but you chose to believe him anyway. And for that, I'm the one who's disappointed. What's that supposed to mean? It means that in your heart, he will always be more important than me. I turned back to my desk and picked up a file. As for breaking up, I agree. The engagement is off. She stood frozen in the middle of the room. You're serious? You were the one who suggested it, I said, looking up at her. I'm just respecting your choice. Fine. Off is off, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. Cole Miller, you'd better not live to regret this. She slammed the door on her way out. The picture frame on my desk still held a photo of Ava and me. I took it out, tore it in half, and dropped the pieces into the trash. As I was leaving work, her father called. Cole, what the hell is wrong with Ava? He boomed. She came home with her eyes swollen from crying. Did you do something to her? I said nothing. Let me tell you something, son. I have one daughter, and I've never let her suffer a moment of hardship in her entire life. What was it you promised me? You said you'd love her and protect her forever. Is this what you call love? His voice climbed higher. What did you do wrong, huh? So her personality is a little direct, her words a little harsh. You're a grown man. Can't you just let it go? Or do you just not love her at all? I hung up. As the screen went dark, the world was finally quiet. I didn't love her. The years I spent pursuing her, I gave her everything. She mentioned a craving for French pastries, and I had a Michelin-starred chef flown in from Paris on a private jet to make them for her. She said she loved looking at the ocean, so I bought 7 beachfront properties in one go, from the Hamptons to Malibu. When Julian graduated and couldn't find a job, all it took was one word from her, and I created a high-paying, low-responsibility management position for him in my company. When her family's company, Sterling Industries, had a cash flow crisis, I was the one who quietly pulled strings and leveraged my resources to help them through it. And I tolerated Julian challenging my sanity, even my life, again and again. Because I loved her. I thought my patience and devotion would be rewarded with her understanding and her heart. Instead, what I got was her, in front of my entire company, casually telling me to sign a pact allowing another man to have a child with her. Late that night, as I was tossing and turning, unable to sleep, a message came through from Ava's best friend. "Cole, this is bad. Ava's drunk. She won't stop crying and screaming your name. She's saying she's going to kill herself." My heart ceased. Those 2 words, kill herself, still managed to strike my deepest nerve. After all these years, I couldn't gamble her life against my pride. Watch her. I'm on my way. I floored it, running several red lights on the way. When I burst into the karaoke lounge, I was hit by a wall of deafening music and laughter. The private room was bathed in colorful, flashing lights. Ava was sitting right in the center of the sofa, perfectly fine. She was holding a microphone, a triumphant smile on her face. There wasn't the slightest hint of someone on the verge of suicide. Julian was next to her, his arm resting casually around her waist. Seeing me, Ava's friends first looked startled, then erupted in roaring laughter. "Ha ha, he actually came. Ava, you win. Damn, Mr. Miller really is the ultimate romantic. Look at that speed. He must have run every red light in the city." Ava put down the microphone and stood up, smiling. She strutted toward me in her high heels, her eyes filled with victorious mockery. "Cole, seeing as you got here so fast," she said, her tone condescending, like she was granting me a favor. "I forgive you." Julian smirked and walked over, holding out a glass of red wine. His voice had that cloying, sickeningly familiar tone. "Come on, man. It was all just a misunderstanding. Drink this, and we'll call it even." He paused, a sly, ambiguous smile playing on his lips. "As for the baby thing, we can always talk about that after you 2 are married." I took the glass of wine, but I didn't drink it. Instead, I raised my hand and threw the entire contents of the glass into Julian's smug face. Splash! Not a single drop was wasted. The dark red liquid streamed down his shocked cheeks, staining the designer white shirt Ava had bought him. The laughter stopped. The room fell into a dead silence. Julian's expression twisted from shock to pure fury. "You son of a bitch. You think you're too good for my apology?" The mask was off. He grabbed a half-full wine bottle from the table and, without a moment's hesitation, swung it directly at my head. Crack! After the heavy, sickening thud, the bottle shattered. Warm blood gushed from my temple, blurring my vision. The force of the impact made my world go dark for a second. I staggered and collapsed to the floor. Shards of glass, wine, and blood covered the ground. The pain was so intense I could barely breathe, a loud ringing in my ears. Through my blurry vision, I saw a flicker of panic on Ava's face. She started to move toward me. "Cole, are you okay?" But Julian grabbed her arm. He held up the back of his hand, which had a tiny scratch from where he'd gripped the bottle too hard. His voice was urgent and full of theatrical panic. "Ava, he's faking it. A grown man isn't going to get knocked down by a little bottle tap. That's all wine on his face. There's no blood. He's just trying to get your sympathy." Ava stopped. She glanced at the insignificant scratch on Julian's hand, then back at me, lying on the floor. The flicker of panic in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, disgusted certainty. She believed him again. She looked down at me, her voice like ice. "Cole, you're getting more pathetic by the minute. Are you really stooping to faking an injury to get attention? It's disgusting." With that, she took Julian's arm, her tone instantly shifting to one of deep concern. "Julian, your hand is hurt. Come on, let's go to the hospital and get that looked at." They walked around me as if I were a pile of trash in their way. The door to the room opened and closed, sealing off the noise of the outside world. It also sealed off the fake laughter inside and the last pathetic shred of hope I had left. I lay there on the cold, sticky floor, the smell of wine and blood filling my senses. The spinning disco lights on the ceiling stabbed at my eyes. I don't know how long I was there before I managed to push myself up with one elbow, dragging my throbbing body to lean against the base of the sofa. Every movement sent a fresh wave of dizziness through me. My hand shaking, I pulled out my slick, bloody phone. The screen was smeared and blurry. I opened my contacts to a number I rarely used, but one I knew was absolutely loyal. Using the last of my strength, I typed out a message, one word at a time. Whatever it takes. I want Sterling Industries bankrupt in 3 days. Ava, don't go home, Julian said after a nurse had cleaned and bandaged the tiny scratch on his hand. He took her hand, his voice laced with its usual manipulative charm. It's been so long since we've had a sleepover. We could just talk like when we were kids. Ava hesitated, her mind clouded by alcohol and exhaustion. She looked into Julian's pleading eyes and finally nodded. Okay, just to talk. He grinned, hailing a cab and giving the driver the name of a 5-star hotel. The suite was spacious and opulent. Julian thoughtfully poured her a glass of water and sat beside her, reminiscing about their childhood. But Ava was distracted. The image of the blood running down Cole's face and the cold, empty look in his eyes as he last looked at her kept flashing in her mind. A sudden, inexplicable panic began to grip her. Ava, you're tired. You should get some rest. Julian's voice cut through her thoughts. He leaned closer, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. She instinctively turned her head away. Julian, stop. But he took that as his cue, pushing her down onto the plush, king-size bed. He pressed his body against hers, his alcohol-laced breath hot against her neck. Ava, I'm so in love with you. I always have been. Julian, what are you doing? Ava was suddenly wide awake, shoving desperately against his weight, her voice sharp with fear. Get off me. I'm practically your sister. He paused for a second, then chuckled, his hands moving to tear at the hem of her dress. Practically a sister, not a real one. Ava, you know how I feel about you. No, stop. You can't do this, she cried, struggling violently. A primal fear seized her heart. This wasn't the mischievous boy she knew. The raw lust in his eyes was terrifyingly foreign. Why not? Julian stopped, propping himself up to look down at her, his expression hardening with an unnerving possessiveness. That asshole Cole already dumped you. You saw how he treated you tonight. He doesn't give a damn about you. Only I do. I've always been here for you. I'd do anything for you. His voice softened again, becoming seductive as his fingers gently stroked her hair. Ava, let me take care of you, okay? I'll treat you 1,000 times better than he ever did. You know I will. Besides, he whispered, you did promise you'd have a baby for me one day. Ava's struggles weakened. Julian's words were the final pinprick that deflated the last of her resistance. She closed her eyes, her body going rigid as she finally gave up the fight. Like a soulless marionette, she lay there as the man above her stripped away her final defenses. The next morning, the shrill ring of her phone jolted Ava from a shallow, tormented sleep. Her body ached all over. She opened her eyes to see Julian sleeping beside her. The sordid memories of the previous night flooded back, making her stomach churn. She grabbed her phone. It was her father. The moment she answered, his furious roar nearly shattered her eardrum. Ava, what in God's name did you do to Cole Miller? Our stock is in free fall. Ava shot upright, the duvet sliding off her body, revealing the angry red marks on her skin. She didn't even bother to cover herself, her heart clenching in a vice of pure terror. On the other end of the line, her father's voice trembled with absolute rage, his words tumbling out in a frantic torrent. Miller Corp just sent official notice. They're terminating every single contract with us. All joint projects are dead. They're pulling all their funding. We're finished. You're about to drive this family into bankruptcy. Tell me, what the hell did you do last night? Every word was a hammer blow to Ava's chest. She sat frozen, motionless, forgetting even to breathe. Her eyes were wide with shock, disbelief, and a rapidly spreading, all-consuming panic. Just then, Julian woke up. He groggily reached over to pull Ava into another embrace, but she shoved him away, her voice raspy as she repeated the devastating news from her father. After hearing it all, Julian just laughed. Ava, this is obviously just his way of getting you back, he said dismissively. He's so in love with you. You think he'd actually let Sterling Industries go bankrupt? It's all for show. His words made Ava pause. She remembered 5 years ago, when Cole was trying to win her over, he'd booked an entire revolving restaurant for her birthday. When she mentioned a craving for macarons from a specific century-old bakery in Paris, he had their pastry chef on a plane the very next day. If she said, I'm in a bad mood, he would immediately cancel a major board meeting to be with her. Even when Julian graduated with no prospects, all it took was one word from her, and Cole had created a cushy, high-paying job for him. These memories calmed her down. She went into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She suddenly recalled a time she'd been sick with a fever, and Cole had driven across 3 states overnight just to buy her soup from her favorite old-school deli. He'd been caught in a thunderstorm on the way back and was soaked to the bone, but he had shielded the container of soup in his jacket, and not a drop had spilled. And then there was last year's company Christmas party, when she twisted her ankle in her high heels. In front of everyone, Cole had immediately knelt down to gently examine her foot, completely oblivious to the dozens of eyes on him. The raw concern in his eyes then couldn't have been an act. Her confidence restored, Ava got meticulously dressed and, with Julian in tow, headed for Miller Corp headquarters. The moment she walked through the lobby doors, she put on the air of the future Mrs. Miller, demanding to see Cole. The receptionist maintained a polite, professional smile, but she didn't offer the usual deferential greeting. She simply, calmly, escorted them to a waiting room. Sitting in the spacious, sterile room, Ava was initially self-assured. She assumed that, like always, Cole would appear within minutes of her arrival, no matter how angry he was. But the minutes ticked by. The only person who came in was the receptionist to refill their water glasses. A knot of anxiety began to form in Ava's stomach. Cole knew she was here. Why wasn't he coming? Could he really not care anymore? No, that was impossible. Every other time they'd fought, he had always been the one to give in. He couldn't stand to see her upset. Julian was pacing impatiently. Ava, he's left us sitting here for over an hour, he complained. What a complete asshole. Who does he think he is? Just because he's got money. His words pierced through Ava's carefully constructed composure. The panic intensified, a feeling of losing control taking hold. Cole had never, ever made her wait. She realized with a sickening jolt that what he said last night might not have been said in anger. The man she thought would always be there, waiting for her, might have actually walked away. The thought sent a chill through her that sank deep into her bones. She couldn't wait any longer. Ava shot to her feet and threw open the door. She had to see Cole right now. She had to make him understand how unreasonable he was being, make him take it all back. She was certain that the moment he saw her, everything would go back to normal. I was in the middle of a board meeting when the heavy wooden doors were thrown open. The project presentation ground to a halt. Every executive at the table turned to stare at the entrance. Ava stood there, her chest heaving, her face a mask of indignation. But when her eyes landed on the white bandage wrapped around my head and the dark, dried blood near my temple, she froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I gave her and Julian a flat, emotionless look, then raised a hand slightly. The security guards who had been trying to stop them immediately stood down and retreated silently. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone, back to work, I said, my voice calm and steady, betraying nothing. The executives quickly gathered their papers and filed out of the room, none of them giving Ava or Julian a second glance. They might as well have been invisible. Ava seemed momentarily stunned by the cold reception and the sight of my injury. But her ingrained sense of entitlement quickly took over. She took a deep breath, marched to the other side of the massive conference table, and slammed her hands down on its polished surface, leaning forward. Cole, what is the meaning of this? Why did you suddenly pull all our contracts? What is wrong with you? Her voice was shrill and accusatory. Do you have any idea what this would do to my family? I leaned back in my leather chair, my fingertips tapping lightly on the table. When I spoke, each word was deliberate and ice cold. Ava, I made myself perfectly clear yesterday. The engagement is off. Our company's partnership was based on that engagement. Therefore, the partnership is also off. Because of a joke? You're going to burn everything to the ground over a single joke. Ava's voice cracked with emotion, as if she were the victim of some great injustice. Julian was drunk. It was a stupid piece of paper. I told you it was a joke from when we were kids. How can you be so petty, so sensitive? A joke. I looked at her as if seeing a complete stranger. The wound on my head throbbed, a dull reminder of last night's humiliation and violence. I was suddenly too tired to argue anymore. I picked up my phone from the table, unlocked it, swiped a few times, and then slid it across the table toward her. Look at this, I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Look at this, and then tell me again that it was just a joke. Ava shot me a suspicious look, then picked up the phone with an impatient sigh. The next second, every trace of color drained from her face. Her eyes widened in horror, her pupils constricting as the phone began to tremble in her hand. Its light illuminated her ashen, deathly pale features. On the screen was Julian's Instagram profile. A new post from the early hours of the morning had a caption that was vulgar and boastful. After all these years, finally got my coming-of-age present from my big sis. Beneath the text were several carefully angled photos. A messy hotel bed, lingerie scattered on the floor. In one selfie, a shirtless Julian was grinning and giving a thumbs up to the camera. And on the pillow next to him, you could see the side of a sleeping woman's face, her hair splayed out, the telltale red marks of a rough night clearly visible on her neck and shoulder. No, that's impossible. Ava's lips trembled, the words barely a whisper. She snapped her head up, staring at Julian as if truly seeing him for the first time. Her eyes were filled with a toxic cocktail of shock, betrayal, and revulsion. Julian's face was white as a sheet. He lunged for the phone. Ava, let me explain. I wasn't thinking straight. I just photoshopped it as a joke. I didn't think he'd actually believe it. I'll delete it right now. Ava, though pale and trembling, still tried to brazen it out. Cole, you're overreacting. It's obviously fake. You know how Julian loves to mess with people. I didn't say a word. I just reached for my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it back to face her. A crystal-clear security video began to play. The well-lit lobby of the hotel. Julian had his arm wrapped tightly around Ava's waist as they stumbled toward the elevator. He leaned in to kiss her neck, his other hand brazenly sliding under the collar of her dress. She didn't push him away. In fact, she leaned into him. The elevator doors opened, and they disappeared inside, locked in an embrace. The conference room was utterly silent. Ava stared at the screen, her face now completely bloodless. Do you need to see more? I asked, taking my phone back. My voice was terrifyingly calm. The hotel sheets, the contents of the trash can. I've had it all collected and sealed. It's ready to be sent for forensic analysis at any time. She swayed on her feet, grabbing the edge of the table to steady herself. Her knuckles were white, her face a mask of gray despair. Just then, the conference room doors burst open with a bang. Her father, flanked by her two older brothers, stormed in, their faces contorted with rage. His eyes scanned the room and immediately locked onto his pale, disheveled daughter. He strode forward and, with a powerful swing, slapped her hard across the face. Crack! The sound echoed in the silent room. You shameless, disgusting tramp. Her father's forehead vein bulged, his roar shaking the walls. You have dragged the Sterling name through the mud. A century of integrity, a spotless reputation, all destroyed by you. Ava stumbled back, clutching her rapidly swelling cheek, staring at her furious father in disbelief. Dad, no, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Explain? What is there to explain? Her older brother, Marcus, cut her off, his eyes like chips of ice. The entire city is already talking about the kind of daughter the Sterlings raised. Running off to a hotel with your goddamn pet project? How are we supposed to show our faces in public ever again? Her other brother, Leo, just shot her a look of pure disgust. He looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Mister. Sterling turned to me, his volcanic anger forcibly replaced by a desperate, pleading shame. Cole, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. It's Ava. She's young. She doesn't know any better. She was manipulated by that little bastard, Julian. We'll deal with her, I promise. As for the business between our companies, could we possibly? I held up a hand, cutting him off. Mr. Sterling. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. The notice of contract termination has been officially delivered. It is legally binding. As for your company's internal affairs, they are of no concern to me. Please handle them yourselves. I pressed the button on the conference phone. Security, please escort our guests out. The doors opened again, and several large security guards entered the room. Mr. Sterling's lips trembled, as if he wanted to say more, but after one look into my cold, unyielding eyes, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He shot Ava one last look of pure hatred and stormed out, his face ashen. Ava's brothers practically dragged her from the room. As they passed me, she looked up, her eyes a swirling mess of desperation, pleading, and the first flickering embers of regret. I looked down at the file on the table, treating her as if she were nothing more than air. That evening, as my Maybach was pulling into the underground garage of my estate, a figure darted out in front of the car. It was Ava. She must have been waiting for a long time. Her hair was a mess from the wind, and her face was ghostly pale in the headlights. She stood with her arms spread wide, blocking the path. My driver, Frank, instinctively slammed on the brakes. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, uncertain. Mr. Miller. I lowered the rear window. The cold night air, carrying the first chill of autumn, rushed in. Cole. Ava's voice was choked with sobs. Please, just let me talk to you. I'm begging you, just for a few minutes. I gave no sign, neither getting out nor telling Frank to drive on. Taking this as permission, She stumbled to the side of the car, her hands gripping the window frame like it was a life raft. Cole, I know I was wrong. I was so wrong. Tears streamed from her red-rimmed eyes. I was a fool. I was completely blind. I never should have trusted him over you. Please forgive me. Can we please start over? I stared silently ahead. She must have mistaken my silence for hesitation, because her grip tightened, her knuckles turning white. All those years we had together, have you forgotten all of it? All the good times, the happy memories, don't they count for anything? She began listing them, one after another, her words tumbling out in a rush, as if she were afraid I'd cut her off. Don't you remember my birthday? You booked that entire restaurant and hired an orchestra just because I mentioned I liked one song they played. I remember, I said, my voice perfectly flat. You spent the whole night complaining it was too quiet and said we should have gone to a club instead. She choked on her words for a second, then quickly tried again. What about the time I had a fever and you stayed up all night with me, changing the cold cloth on my forehead? I remember. The next morning, you told me I was useless because I couldn't even pour a glass of water correctly and kept waking you up. No, I was just. She searched for an explanation, but found none, so she pressed on. And that time you were on a business trip in Paris, and you flew back overnight just because I said I missed you on the phone. I remember. The first thing you said when you saw me was to ask why I didn't bring back the Chanel bag you wanted. You said I never listened to you. Each of my responses was a cold, hard stone, shattering every beautiful memory she tried to build. The moment she held up as proof of our deep connection, I mercilessly exposed as evidence of her own selfishness and disregard. Her face slowly turned to ash, the light in her eyes dying out. Her hands lost their strength, sliding limply from the window frame. That's not how it was. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She shook her head, her gaze unfocused. You never used to be like this. You said you would love me forever. Why have you become so cruel? The moment you looked at me, with blood running down my face, and chose to take his hand, call me disgusting, and walk away. My gaze remained fixed on a wall in front of me, my voice unwavering. That's when we ended. I didn't look at her again. Frank, have security deal with this. Right away, Mr. Miller. Frank picked up the car's intercom and quietly called the security office. Within a minute, 2 uniformed guards came running. They apologized to me, then turned to Ava, their tone polite but firm. Ma'am, you need to leave the premises. You're blocking a resident's access. Cole, no, please, just give me one more chance. One last chance. My words seemed to snap her out of her stupor. She started screaming, fighting against the guards. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please don't leave me. The guards didn't hesitate. One on each arm, they began to pull her away from the car. Her desperate cries and struggles echoed in the empty garage, growing fainter and more distant. I raised the window, shutting out her despairing form and all the noise. The car was silent again, save for the low purr of the engine. Drive, Frank. Yes, Mr. Miller. The car moved forward smoothly into the garage, without a moment's pause. The collapse of Sterling Industries was faster and more absolute than anyone could have predicted. I hadn't made a threat. I had given an order. Once the full, colossal power of Miller Corp was directed at a single target, the result was annihilation. Contracts vanished, assets were frozen, projects collapsed, and a steady, surgical stream of negative press sealed their fate. The company, which had been a hollow shell for years, didn't even last the 3 days. The night Sterling Industries officially declared bankruptcy, a storm of absolute despair and rage consumed the Sterling family. According to the police report, her father, having lost everything, directed all of his venom at Julian, blaming him for the ruin of their family. The argument quickly escalated into savage violence. Ava's 2 brothers threw the first punches, and her father joined in. And Ava, screaming, cursing, like a woman possessed, stabbed Julian over 30 times after he was already on the ground. The poisonous fruit they had so carefully nurtured, they ended up harvesting themselves in the most brutal way imaginable. Julian was pronounced dead at the scene. Mr. Sterling, his 2 sons, and Ava were all arrested. They were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before her final transfer to a maximum security facility, Ava made one last request through her lawyer. She wanted to see me one more time. I agreed. The weather was beautiful that day. Sunlight streamed through the reinforced glass of the prison visiting room, casting bright but cold patches of light on the floor. I was wearing a perfectly tailored suit. Beside me was my new girlfriend, Sophia, a woman from a good family, with a gentle nature and eyes that held nothing but trust and love for me. Our fingers were intertwined, our posture relaxed and intimate. When they brought Ava in, she was wearing a standard prison jumpsuit. Her skin was sallow, her eyes hollow and empty, all of her former radiance gone. But the moment she saw me, a faint light flickered in those empty depths, like a drowning person spotting a piece of driftwood. Then her gaze fell on my hand, clasped in Sophia's. The tiny flicker of light was instantly extinguished, leaving behind nothing but utter devastation. "Cole, you." Her voice was a dry, raspy whisper. I looked at her, my expression neutral. It was like looking at a stranger you pass on the street. "You wanted to see me," I said, my voice as smooth and calm as a frozen lake. "What did you want to say?" Ava's lips trembled, and tears immediately welled in her eyes, a mixture of despair and regret. "Why? How could you move on so fast?" "Miss Sterling, please watch your tone," I said coldly. "We are no longer together. My personal life is not your concern." "No, Cole, I regret it. I was wrong. I was so wrong." She lunged forward, but the guards behind her held her fast. She struggled against them, her voice rising to a frantic scream. "I was an idiot. I was blind. I never should have believed Julian. I never should have treated you that way." Her wild eyes darted to Sophia, and her expression twisted with jealousy and a mad hatred. Sophia, startled by her venom, instinctively shrank behind me. I gently squeezed her hand to reassure her. That small, tender gesture seemed to break something in Ava. "It's because of her, isn't it? You won't forgive me because you found her. You bitch. You stole my man," she shrieked, her words turning into vile curses. "She has nothing to do with this," I said. "Ava, the reason we are where we are today is because of the choices you made. I simply accepted the outcome." I looked at her one last time. "You asked for a meeting? I came. Now we're done." I lifted my wrist and glanced at my watch, as if I were running late for a minor appointment. "My time is up." I gave a slight nod to the guards, then turned back to Ava and delivered my final farewell. "Goodbye." Then, with my arm around Sophia's shoulders, I turned and walked away without a second thought. Behind me, I could hear Ava's completely broken, soul-shattering screams and curses, filled with bottomless despair. But the sound was soon cut off by the heavy, closing door, until it was nothing more than a muffled echo. The sun shone down on Sophia and me, warm and bright. The shadows of the past, along with the wretched people and events they contained, were finally and completely buried.